Ballmer and Gates talk about the economy, Nokia launches its App Store, and NHK develops a bendable paper-thin display. All that news and more on this week's World Tech Update. Thanks for joining us here on World Tech Update. I'm Nick Barber. We'll start our news this week with Nokia and its new app store it launched called Ovi. The store consolidates several existing Nokia services, including mapping and multimedia applications. According to the company, the store offers around 20,000 different items and can be accessed by around 50 million Nokia devices worldwide. The opening of the Nokia store helps it compete with Apple's App Store and RIM's BlackBerry App World.
The Ovi store itself places no limitations on the kind of content that can be served there. It is more up to the innovation of the developers and the content companies, but in large one can say that we will have games, we will have applications, productivity tools, wallpapers, ringtones, the whole lot.
Unfortunately, Nokia wasn't ready for the number of users who tried to access the store at launch, causing service slowdowns and website timeouts. Microsoft's Steve Ballmer and Bill Gates were on hand at the company's recent CEO summit. Let's take a listen to what they had to say.
The cloud, the internet. Some people probably think the internet revolution is second half of the game, and I'll tell you, we're coming into halftime. And when guys like Jeff and us and Bernard and Chris talk about cloud computing, I was sitting here wondering during that whether, I was getting all pumped up, and I don't even know how much the buzzword is buzzing. But the degree of change that will continue to come as essentially businesses and IT departments embrace the internet, it's unbelievable. And so we sit here today and say, look, the innovation is going to proceed as rapidly. And then people say, no, it can't be. Capital is going to be taken away. I don't know anybody in our industry actually who's cutting their R&D budget.
The opportunities for innovation are stronger today than ever. The drug companies will get back into a high productivity mode. The software IT revolution, we're just at the start of that. What we can do for education, communication, what that looks like for the efficiencies of world markets, we are just at the beginning of that.
South Korea's LG Display announced on Wednesday that it developed a full HD, 23-inch, 3D LCD panel with enhanced brightness. According to the company, that means this new panel has twice the brightness of conventional 3D panels and has the world's highest brightness among 3D displays. In conventional 3D displays, most of the technology is embedded outside of the panel or in the viewing glasses. But with LG's model, most of the technologies are embedded directly in the panel. But even still, with the new display, polarized glasses still need to be worn to take advantage of the 3D. The company plans to display the panel at the upcoming Society for Information Displays in Texas. Japan's public broadcast network, NHK, is developing a television on a sheet of plastic so thin it bends. The nearly 6-inch prototype is based on organic light-emitting diode, or OLED technology, and has a relatively low resolution of 213 by 120 pixels. OLED is relatively new technology that is beginning to garner a lot of attention. Because OLED pixels contain an organic material that emits its own light, no additional light is required, and that means a screen that's thinner, lighter, and uses less power than existing technologies like LCD and plasma. NHK's flexible OLED isn't a first, though. At this year's CES in Las Vegas, Sony showed an OLED prototype of its own. The Sony screen was a smaller 2.5-inch model with a lower resolution of 160 by 120 pixels. But it had fewer visual imperfections than the NHK screen. Let's now go to my colleague Martin Williams, who's in Taipei ahead of the opening of Computex. Martin, you've got a preview for us this week, and you'll be hosting from there next week, right?
Thank you, Nick. Yes, next week a special edition of World Tech Update from here in Taiwan. Computex, one of the world's biggest IT shows, begins on Tuesday, and we'll be covering all of the big announcements and bringing you all of the big news next week. One of the main attractions this year is the likely appearance of mini laptops or netbooks with Google's Android mobile operating system on board. Taiwanese companies including Acer, ASUSTeK and MSI have all reportedly been working on Android netbooks and other devices that use the OS. There should also be netbooks with chips using cores from ARM instead of microprocessor king Intel. Qualcomm, for example, plans to show off new products based on its Snapdragon chipsets. Plus, there's a whole hall devoted to WiMAX. We've already had a chance to preview one new product. ASUS, best known for the EPC, will launch the eNAS, which has a terabyte of storage to provide a network hub for data. There's also a touchscreen through which some of the data can be accessed and an uninterruptible power supply built in. It can act as a communication hub for wireless devices connected to a local wired network and will cost less than $1,000. So a lot to look forward to then. A special edition of World Tech Update from Taipei next week.
All right, Martin, we're looking forward to it. And we have one last item for you before we close out the show. We recently took a trip to the MIT Media Lab where we saw Siftables, one of the prototypes that's heading towards commercialization sometime next year. Each block is an interactive computer that can show graphics, sense the way it's being moved, and communicate wirelessly with a computer.
So each Siftable has a color OLED display, which is great because you can look at it at a very glancing angle and you don't lose the image. They use infrared communication to communicate with their neighbors in all 4 directions. They have a Bluetooth radio to communicate with the computer, and some flash memory to store images or other program data. They also have a 3-axis accelerometer, so they can be sensitive to their motion, shaking, tilting, or other spatial motions.
In its most basic demonstration, the faces on these blocks look towards each other when they sense they're close together. In another demonstration, the Siftables can help solve simple math equations. And if you look closely, you'll notice that the numbers and equation symbols can be changed by tilting each Siftable. Merrill started work on the project because he wanted to create a physical interface that's easy and natural to understand, something different than the commonplace mouse and keyboard. As they are now, each Siftable costs $100 to make, but Merrill hopes that price will come down once they are mass-produced. Well, that's our show. Thanks for joining us here on World Tech Update. Next week, Martin will be coming to us from Computex in Taipei. Be sure to tune in. And find out what's coming up on each week's show by following us on Twitter and joining our Facebook fan page. As we head out, we'll leave you with video of Klingon antivirus software from Sophos. I'm Nick Barber, and for all of us here at the IDG News Service, thanks for watching, and we hope to see you next week.
Jack